Izan Almansa is the 2024 NBA Draft's international big man worth tracking. This is Floor and Ceiling. Let's break it down. In my estimation, Izan Almansa has a case to be considered the best pure play finisher in his draft class. After 2 seasons with Overtime Elite, the Spanish big man is now with the G League Ignite, and I think he's being a little overlooked. The important thing to know about Almansa is that he has been a huge winner at just about every level so far. He was the MVP of the 2022 Under-18 European Championship while also winning the entire tournament with Spain, the MVP of the Under-17 World Cup that same summer, and 1 year later this past summer, the MVP and the winner of the Under-19 World Cup. This is a really impressive body of work, and it should not be discounted that Almansa has directly translated to legitimate winning up to this point. I think a big part of this is that his role has been scalable, at least so far, to every level and every team that he's been on. The 6'10" forward is very capable in the pick and roll, and he has great hands and generally good positioning to screen and then finish. Even though Almansa is not overly explosive, as we'll dive into shortly, he has incredibly soft touch from close range when he doesn't get all the way to the basket. Looking ahead, I'd like to see him be more willing with his left hand, but for now, his righty touch shot gets the job done a lot of the time. We can see Almansa's feathery touch out of post-ups as well. He hasn't been used in this capacity as much with the G League Ignite. In fact, his usage overall has been too low in my opinion, but he can also be effective in these situations. Almansa is not overly physical or even that strong, but he gets to his spots and he has a go-to hook shot at the basket, which is useful. Here, we've seen flashes with both the right and the left hand. This year with the G League Ignite, Almansa's numbers have not exactly popped off the page. In 33 games, he's averaging a little more than 10 points per game in 27 minutes. That doesn't seem spectacular, it's not, but there's some necessary context to add. First, keep in mind that he's one of the youngest players in this draft. He only turns 19 a month before draft day, and he's playing against established pros. Then, Almansa has a tiny usage rate, below 15%, and despite getting very few touches, which I think is important to build rhythm as a pick and roll big, he's still engaged and fairly efficient. Along with that, sure, Almansa's numbers have been affected, but I also think it was important to see that he could still be productive even while not being the top dog on the team like he's been with Spain at youth levels. Clearly, Almansa can catch and finish, and actually, I think his athleticism is a little underrated. In particular, this shows up with regards to his rebounding. Izan has gotten better as an athlete every year since he came to the US from Spain, and even though he does have limitations, he has excellent footwork, very solid coordination, a high motor, and it's not like he cannot catch lobs or play above the rim. This season, Almansa is averaging about 7.5 rebounds per game, though I actually think that he's better than what the stats indicate. His rebounding rates on both ends are quite good, especially his 11.1% on the offensive boards. Almansa fights hard to gain position, and simply put, he outworks defenders who are not willing to put in that same dirty work on the glass. Izan's timing stands out to me because he needs to come off the floor with precision given some of his limitations. And again, I think his motor needs to be commented on. Almansa is great about executing second and third jumps to secure rebounds and create extra chances. His hands, which he uses to finish plays like I brought up earlier, are a huge factor here as well. Almansa prolongs possessions, and I expect a lot of NBA teams to love this about him. It's fair to wonder whether he's maxed out his athletic improvements, But I also think about Alperen Şengün, how his athleticism was perceived before the draft, and how his combination of size, feel, and touch around the basket has both translated to and kept growing in the NBA. Still, it's only logical to have questions about whether Almansa can be as effective finishing plays at the next level. His positional size at center is not the best at 6'10", and he doesn't have particularly long arms or reach. Measurements-wise, the Spanish big can sometimes resemble more of a 4, even though his skill set is that of a 5. This can show up on the court, since it means that his catch radius is less, such as here when he cannot secure the lob. Almansa can make multiple efforts jumping off the floor, but it would be misleading to say that he has quick pop, since there's definitely some loading time. For sure, he's not the type of big to dunk all over a defender. I think Ethan can offset this, and he will have more room to work with in the NBA, but he also hasn't necessarily proven that his previous style of winning is going to convey against bigger, stronger, longer athletes. Everything I just touched on shows up in the post as well. For example, here against the Miami Heat's Orlando Robinson, Almansa is giving up size and he's neither strong nor long enough to counter this. Or in this play, Almansa has a mismatch against 6'6" Justin Powell, but he's not aggressive enough establishing position and he's not long or bouncy enough to catch the pass. In general, Ethan can still have issues against real length, which is what he'll be up against in the NBA. On top of that, he's not shown himself to be dominant or crafty enough to the point where he warrants clear-outs in the post. So, if Almansa cannot finish at the NBA level like he's done at previous levels, then I'm not really sure where his contribution in terms of scoring really comes from. As a shooter, he's a total non-factor. Almansa cannot space the floor to any extent. He's only made 3 of his 20 attempted threes this season, and his free throw numbers are unexpectedly worrying. The Spanish big is currently at 54% from the charity stripe, which is alarming. And moreover, it's worth mentioning that both now and historically, he's never drawn free throws at a high clip. It's a bit of an odd situation. Almansa has amazing hands from close range, and we see his touch with his floaters and push shots, but he's shocking from further out. You can tell that Almansa does not want to take threes. Still, due to his touch, I'm choosing to remain somewhat optimistic here, but a total rework will have to be done, both in terms of his mechanics and also his mentality. Even if Almansa is not a top-tier athlete, and in the worst of scenarios, he does not improve in the post or as a shooter, I think he'll always maintain some gravity as a play finisher in the pick and roll. We saw earlier how he can roll short into a little push shot, but he can also slow down and facilitate. I really like Almansa's feel and how he processes the game, so I think NBA teams can extract value from his passing when he gets downhill. An important caveat here is that the G League Ignite has barely used Almansa in this role, but I think that speaks more to the reps that the likes of Ron Holland and Modest Buzelis are getting. Broadly speaking, I think that Almansa's role has been simplified too much. I understand why that's been done, but it's hard to say that it's been conducive to team success given the G League Ignite's dismal record. He's been almost exclusively used as a play finisher, which is his best virtue, but he can do much more than just score at the basket. Almansa can make decisions with the ball in his hands, and he can create for others in a way that hasn't been fully tapped into. Of course, there are times where his decision-making is not perfect, but that's to be expected from an 18-year-old. Almansa might miss some reads, but I also think it's important to give him the chance to make those reads. For instance, the results can be iffy when he handles the ball, but I fully believe there's some potential there. In the same way that he can run simple handoffs and pitch-offs, there's been real flashes of him faking that handoff and instead driving to the rim. Almansa has barely gotten to experiment with the G League Ignite in order to make life easier for his teammates, which is disappointing. More than most other prospects in my opinion, it's very important to watch his tape from previous years and competitions. Otherwise, it's tougher to tell what his full skill set in terms of passing, handling, and not just scoring can look like. Even though I think Izan Almansa has a lot more to show on offense, I feel very uneasy about his defense. Almansa lacks the speed to keep up with players in space, and he's neither big, long, or bouncy enough to recover once he gives up the blow-by. In the NBA, it will be easy for teams to target him, and it's not a stretch to say that the Spanish big is not switchy at all. Almansa is not multidimensional in how teams can game plan with him in the middle of the floor, so this really narrows down his defensive versatility in a major way. His mobility and physical tools also hinder him when it comes to guarding the pick and roll. The NBA is such a screen-heavy league nowadays, so you can see how this is a problem. Basically, it boils down to the same things. Almansa has to be nearly perfect in his positioning every single time, or his team is working from a disadvantage. His radius in terms of length and pop is limited, so he doesn't take up that much space. And since his feet are slow, this also means that Izan often needs a lot of space between him and the ball handler, which can be dangerous. Once he's in the NBA, it's fair to assume that these problems will be exacerbated, particularly early on, since playing the 5 is one of the steepest learning curves for any rookie. In the league, maybe the hope long-term is that Almansa will mostly play and drop without really having to switch all that much. Moving less, with the correct personnel around him and getting active help, he is a little better. And at the end of the day, he's also 6'10", which obviously helps at times. However, everything we've seen during this season on defense has been really lackluster. It's not just the eye test, it's also the production. Almansa averages under 1 block and under 1 steal per game. He barely picks up fouls, sure, but I almost wish he fouled more since it would mean higher activity on this end. Looking at recent seasons, the fact of the matter is, there are very few bigs with Almansa's poor defensive indicators who have NBA success. Izan Almansa is a super interesting and pretty unique prospect who'll probably end up between 20 and 25 on my big board. I'm very hopeful on offense with his feel, play finishing, and untapped passing and ball handling. Actually, I think he has plenty of avenues on that end to be successful in the NBA. But I'm very unsure about him on defense because he lacks the physical tools and the production to such a huge extent. As always, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like. Make sure to leave a comment telling me what you think of Izan Almansa. And if you enjoy the channel, if you want to watch more content like this, make sure to subscribe. Take care, and I'll catch you guys next time.